killing zombies. Oh, I already forgot to fucking do this. 6.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, Ed Carbajal. Weekly, we are brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for MMA news, MMA stories, and our video podcast. Ed, how's it going on the East Coast, brother?
Pretty good. I mean, the cold weather's gone. The nice weather's finally coming in for a little while. Excuse my coughing because if you folks watch the news, that Nova Scotia fire, smoke, or whatever is actually dripping its way down in New Jersey. So if I seem like I'm a little off when I speak, that's why, because the air is actually not great in New Jersey. When is it ever great? But yeah, so but that's other than that, I mean, Ultimate Fighter started kind of like a nice way to lead us back into some UFC events with some fighters that folks can all get behind between Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor. I haven't watched. This is the season 31, and I haven't watched the Ultimate Fighter. Shit, I can't even tell you the last. I think the last time I watched is when they had the flyweight tournament thing. Was the last time I seriously watched the Ultimate Fighter, and man, I mean, something about Connor. The guy brings eyeballs. I even watched 2 episodes of his Netflix thing. You know what I mean? There's just something about the guy that makes you want to find out what makes him tick. Um, the first episode, again, it's my first Ultimate Fighter in a while, and the format and all the reality show format, I could give a shit about. I really don't care. I've never cared for reality. The only time I did like it was obviously when everyone did, when it first, because it was something brand new when the Ultimate Fighter first came out. But with the whole going on 30 years of UFC and how they've evolved from what they were back to from the first season to now, it's definitely different. And but it's also kind of like there's a weird nostalgic thing that tuning into that episode. It's on Tuesday nights, and I teach jiu-jitsu Tuesday nights. So to come home and rush and watch it kind of brings me back to like when I started doing jiu-jitsu. That was literally what I was doing. I was coming home and we would all watch the Ultimate Fighter and talk about it in class. So it's just weird that's where it's all full circle, kind of like just weird. Like, here I am now, a black belt and teaching jiu-jitsu, I know this Saturday when I go to train again, people will be talking to me about the Ultimate Fighter. So it's just, there's things that I like about it. There's things obviously I don't like, but it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. It's fun. It seems like it's fun this season so far.
It has potential because it has such a big fight behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think that it's more entertaining because of the fact that it's bringing back some veteran fighters. So it's not, you're giving it's a little bit different of a storyline. We've seen it in the past in other seasons. Um, I like it better than just having a bunch of prospects because I feel like obviously the Ultimate Fighter was kind of created to get the name brand out, but at the same time also help develop talent to help fill out their roster, which in 2005 was pretty depleted, especially when you consider Pride and WEC and all that stuff was going on. So the
Yeah.
UFC had to create stars. I don't see that as necessary anymore. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
this kind of seems to have run its course in a lot of people's mind. But not every season is Chandler and McGregor. And like I said, you're bringing back some veterans so people know some of these guys. Trevor Wells competes next week. He
Mm-hmm.
fights Timur Valiev. Wells trains down the street from me. Met him bunch of times down at Team Quest, and he's fighting a former World Series of Fighting champion who made a little run in the UFC as well. And then most of these guys' runs ended fairly bad, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them got cut. For a couple of the guys like Catone, 2-2 get cut. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
that's it's who you are, obviously, how name value and what you carry. So um,
Yeah, there's I mean, obviously there's obviously the weird stuff that happened with the creation of the season. But McGregor kind of addressed in the episode like he's got guys of his own that he wanted on the show, and they had they had to send some guys away with promises of a phone call when they need them to actually fill a card up, which is a little. It's on the one side it's messed up, but on the other side it's like, okay, at least I don't have to go through the show to get on a card.
Exactly.
So
That's the thing. Like with the contender series and stuff now, these dudes are really like signing up for a lot of extra drama. When most of them would likely probably get a contender series fight.
yeah, speaking of contender series, I mean, just reminded me the news was came out yesterday, last night, I think. Chandler Cole's going to be on contender series. Thanks to shout out to Nolan King, who's been on the podcast multiple times. Wrote the piece with a announced contender series fight, and he's another one that's kind of like that. Went through the Ultimate Fighter, didn't make it into the UFC, so now he's got his contender series shot, and he's been picking up wins, fighting in the regional scene. A lot of his more recent fights you could watch over Expectation Sports, where I cover, I interview a lot of fighters for Ross Hilton that picked up the win last weekend that I mentioned. So yeah, I mean it's crazy how much more opportunities are out there for these guys now, not just for the UFC, but with everything going on.
There's fights everywhere, dude. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much that you can't even watch it all now if you wanted to try. Where obviously it wasn't that long ago where you were searching YouTube for random videos of
Mm-hmm.
Brazil Open fight 1996
Yeah.
just to see something, you know.
Like I literally watched most Pride events on DVD after they happened, and they were still like, like up until I caught up to what was current. I remember when I found out about them. I mean, that's why I have a box. I literally have the box sitting over there of all my Pride DVDs
Yeah.
because
Well,
yeah.
that's now and then now there's so much going on and um you know, eh, I think the season of the Ultimate Fighter is going to be interesting, but at the same time, we'll see how it continues.
Mhm.
After a couple weeks, will it kind of rub off? Because I heard fairly good reviews from most people about the first episode as far as
Mhm.
um, the layout. It's all pretty standard, but there was a little bit. They had the face off between the two dudes and between Chandler and McGregor and stuff. So you had some of that stuff that could potentially wear off a few weeks down the line. But it comes down to how the good the fights are, and if one of these young kids
Mhm.
or one of the prospects that they have on there develops into a superstar, then it all becomes worth it again. We've kind of not. It's been a while. I mean, I without even trying to
Mhm.
rack my brain, I can't even remember the last Ultimate Fighter that you know went on to maybe Usman. I mean, I may be forgetting somebody, but like I can't really think of anybody in the last 5 years that's jumped off and
And it's
really
because
popped.
there's literally so many seasons, and then you have like Ultimate Fighter Brazil, and
Mhm.
I
That's
mean,
what I
I
mean.
remember I wrote a piece maybe a year or two ago for 137 PM about like the other best Ultimate Fighters from other seasons, and I had to leave out the obviously like the ones you mentioned Usman. I didn't put him in it because I was trying to go back to the earlier seasons, and they gave me a set number, so I was literally pulling out like Diego Sanchez and other fighters that were from way back that have done went on to do great things in the sport. Um, one of the things that come to mind when you think about Ultimate Fighter too, because like, you never know what's going to happen with these guys, whether if or not they win or gals, because there's like wasn't Rose Namajunas like not one of the greatest ones from the crop of Ultimate Fighter that she was on, and look at what she went on to do, and then Brandon Moreno, who's fighting in July. I
Hmm.
mean, he didn't even finish the season he was on. They started throwing him on cards right away,
Yeah,
and then they cut him, and then they brought him back to become the Brandon Moreno that
and
everybody knows and
everything's
loves.
history now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, there's potential, but like that's what I said. Everything's got to come out of it. Um, and we'll just have to see how it unfolds. But like I said, reviews have been good. A couple fighters I'm interested in. You got Knight,
Hmm.
the from BKFC, UFC, in the
Yeah.
past and stuff. So always kind of exciting. But
Yeah, Mando Gutierrez, I actually interviewed him for his last fight before he got called up because his fight's on Spectation Sports, the last fight he had. That's a while ago. I'd have to check my notes on the date, but it was a while ago. I want to interview him again, but I know they're all all the guys that are on the show are like, they have that NDA. They can't talk to anybody until things are pretty much said and done, or whatever the case may be. So that they're not allowed to reveal much, but unless obviously the folks that have exclusives will be the first ones to reveal anything. But I think MMA Junkie's doing something after every episode, and a couple of other outlets that the UFC has given them, access to stuff too. But it's definitely fun, man. I mean, I'm glad that they're doing it in the summer. I mean, I still worry about the Chandler McGregor fight happening because of all the other stuff going on, but I hope we don't lose it, man. I mean, it should be fun. I mean, it's definitely whatever the UFC marketing machine is. I don't know who the mind is behind all that stuff, but whatever they've been doing, they do it very well.
Yes, they do. Um, and we'll see. I mean, it's clearly on McGregor at this point.
Mm-hmm.
What the future holds for that fight, and obviously for himself. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And like you said, there's got to be some chaos. I'm sure something will go down that'll make headlines for something. It'll probably be some nonsense, but
Mm-hmm.
um, it's something to watch. And and like you said, McGregor and Chandler add that
Mm-hmm.
extra. They give you a reason to watch, even if you're not completely into it. Like I am. I mean, I think the whole world is kind of burnt out on the Ultimate Fighter. Anybody that's been following the sport for more than say 10 years is just
Yeah,
probably kind of ship kind of sailed on the idea.
yeah. It's funny that you say that because like, it seems to be something that we're not just saying here on this podcast. Like, there's literally like Jack Slack just put out a video. When did the UFC fall off? Like 2 days ago. I saw something else on, and again, I mean, like he's independent. Like you could appreciate it coming from him, or guys like us, because we don't have a loyalty to anybody really. I mean, um, but I forget who wrote there's a CBS Sports article that was kind of saying the same thing. A lot of people, I mean, too many events, and I mean, even I think James Lynch has videos on stuff like this, and it really is just becoming like it's a case of like maybe yes, we're happy that we have fights almost every weekend, but it doesn't always have to be them. Like there's plenty of other people that we could be
Yeah,
watching.
exactly. It's a fine line. It's a fine line because we obviously don't want to bash it too much, but at
Yeah,
the same time, people are sensitive. So if you say something, um,
especially now. Yeah.
yeah, and the reality is that it's. I don't mind that there's UFC every weekend. I just think that they've watered it down with guys that should be fighting on the regional scene, and I think they've hurt
Hmm.
the regional scene, and they've taken money out of other promoters' pockets and other locales. I mean, it's not, and it was one thing when the UFC was visiting city after city after city, making available to everybody. 80% of the events now, I think, it was 60 to 80% of the events are all
Yeah,
at
the
the Apex
Apex.
now. So there's no there. It's not a world. It's not it it's border this sounds crazy to say this, but it's essentially a regional show that goes out once every 3 months to a town. Like
What's crazy is that again, whatever they're doing with their marketing, the machine that does it, they have their fans that don't mind any of this, and they'll pay the inflated ticket price to go see an event when they go. It actually drives. It's probably why they're doing it. People are paying when they do leave. It's like a big deal when they go somewhere. So people are willing to pay those crazy ticket prices that you and I that are it's crazy to you and I because who've been going to events forever. Like I might be going to a regional show this Saturday in Jersey, Dead Series 29 that our friend Mr. Peacock that was on the podcast. He'll be calling that event. But I mean, if I go to that, you know what I mean. I'm probably gonna enjoy that more than recording the UFC on ESPN and sitting through all those commercials. But yeah, and then they just booked more. It doesn't look like it's gonna slow down. So obviously it's working for them because they just booked like what 5, 6 more events they just announced.
Yeah, and again, like it's nice that there's something every weekend. It doesn't leave any you ever
Mm-hmm.
wondering, if you're bored or you're sitting around, you always got fights to watch. It's just there was ways to watch these same fights. They were just had a different banner over the cage. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see the long run how it plays out. But I just it doesn't feel like the Super Bowl of MMA anymore. It
Mm.
really doesn't. It feels like that about once a year. It feels like that for once, maybe twice a year when you get that super card.
Yeah,
Potentially something like we're looking like at the end of July with the Gagey card. Potentially the
yeah.
Connor card.
And I feel like they dropped the ball with that. Like that really should have been International Fight Week. I mean, I don't mind the card that's on International Fight Week, but like it's like they keep shooting themselves in the foot. And I know Dana White kind of remarked about that when it came to like the folks when Mexican media was asking, you got all these Mexican champions doing well. How come you're not doing anything like in Mexico or on Mexico? One of the dates they have booked in the Apex is freaking September 16th, which is the date that everyone thought was like, oh, we thought they were going to do something. So I don't know. I mean,
Well, help me
I
out
could be
because
wrong.
I'm not. But that's the real Mexican Independence Day, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you live in
And
California, you know that.
yeah, no, I know, it's not. But it's also a big boxing date. It's
Mm-hmm.
like Cinco de Mayo and that weekend in September or that week in September have always been historically a De La Hoya or Canelo
Mm-hmm.
or something fight. So UFC really never embraced that at all, though at all. But now they have Mexican champions, so you would think that that would make sense. But what, they got it for the Apex? I mean, I just saw it, everything they
Yeah.
announced today was Apex, 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 and then Vegas in December, which
Yeah.
probably will be the target for McGregor and Chandler. But honestly, until McGregor gets in the USADA pool, nobody really knows, what kind of strings they're going to pull for him or how that's going to unfold. But
Yeah.
I mean, Kai Kara France does fight this weekend. He's always fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, had a couple uh, good fights with Moreno. He headlines. Alex Caceres is a Ultimate Fighter dude who really has had a heck of a run in the UFC. I mean, his record's 20-13, but he's got he's in the co-main event, which tells you a little bit of the watered down level. But at the same time, he's somebody you think that they would get behind and promote a little bit more. He's got the look, he's got the character. Seems like a really good dude inside and outside the cage, as far as not
Yeah.
not committing crimes and stuff. So you
I
wonder.
haven't I haven't seen I thought this fight, I mean the Jim Miller fight with
They
Jared
got
Gordon.
a replacement last minute. It got
So
announced. I don't.
they haven't updated the website, so I'm not bringing it up.
Yeah, no. I think it literally broke almost as we were
Getting ready to do this.
getting ready to record. I saw it and I didn't recognize the kid that signed up to fight him. But
Mm.
yeah, Jim Miller. I mean, you know, I I would have almost made Miller and Gordon the main event. Like, what does Miller got to do to get any kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, it's an
Yeah.
Apex card. Like, what? It just seems to me like that would be kind of the thing that I'd be focusing and rewarding some of the guys who have been around forever. Tim Elliott's on the
I
card.
I know they're
You
supposed to
know,
come to Atlantic City at some point soon, so maybe the fact that they're having a fight this weekend, I mean, I don't know when they're going to do when they're going to use him. Then it always shocks me when they have these guys that are they're going to be holding cards. I don't know. I just feel like they should make because they got to pay for travel for their teams and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just weird to me, but
yeah.
maybe the
Weren't they
payoff.
talking Atlantic City in beautiful December or January? Wasn't that
Oh, that's
like?
what it is. Yeah, because I said it's the worst time to go. Yeah, so maybe they put him on that. I forget how many fights he has left. I know he there's a number he wants to hit. So whenever
I
he
mean,
calls it his last one, they should let him do it. You know, hopefully in Atlantic City, New Jersey, or at least in at the Garden. Because Jim Miller definitely would deserve that. But
well, he's got to get to UFC 300 at this point.
yeah.
So he could do 100, 200, and 300. I think that's got to be like, and if anything, that would be the perfect retirement to retire at UFC 300. You
Mm-hmm.
essentially have been through the entire history of the UFC.
There's actually so I'm gonna bring up the card just because there's actually some really nice fights on there. Like people are already like they are one thing I'll give credit to them as far as the quality when it's on a regular ESPN they do bring because the prelims I'm surprised at some of the names on the prelims here. So here it is from UFC.com. Like Andre Arlovsky is on the prelims for a heavyweight bout against Dontel Mays and John Castaneda. So anybody that was into Combate Medicas when he was like their guy,
Hmm.
he's fun to watch. I've interviewed him in the past for Front Proof Media. Jamie Malarkey versus Mohammed Naim. Like these are good fights on the prelims.
Yeah, no, there's names. I mean, there's some good fights. It's just, like I feel like a lot of these should be mixed in and should have been the undercard on a pay per view.
Philippe Lin's
You know,
first fight versus
first
Max
fight.
Christian.
I don't think they like him. I think they want. I think they want to get rid of him as soon as possible.
This is a
Um,
great strawweight bout. At least Reed versus Jinyu Frey.
mhm. No, I
Yeah.
mean, now you pull it up. There's actually some nice names on it. It just seems like it's not top heavy.
Hmm.
As far as like you think like okay, historically that would have like a really nice main event, like you'd a real and not that this one isn't, but it's not it's not even a number one contender fight, so
Hmm.
it kind of takes from it. But it's mentioned it's on regular ESPN. Looks like
6 o'clock is the first fight. 6 p.m. Eastern, and then I think it's 8. I have it up here. Hold on.
so you got a late start, late night for you on
Not really. It's actually early because usually the main card starts at 9. Prelims start at
hour
6.
hour
So
earlier than normal. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So that's actually nice, and it's all on regular ESPN. So if I do go to the Dead Serious show, I can record this and go support my local fighters out here in Jersey.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's what sounds like fun. Go see Mr. Peacock and
Hmm.
get up and close to some hungry fighters.
Yeah. But so before we close out the show, I wanted to an interesting as we were trying to figure out with our crazy schedule that we've had lately. I mean, just the quick housekeeping notes for folks. Next week is probably will likely be another Thursday show. We will get back to Wednesdays eventually with our guest bookings, but our schedules lately have just not been very agreeable. But the the one of the things that came up when I was doing my homework looking at Tough and what we were going to talk about tonight. Someone had asked on if I don't know if you're familiar with Quora. It's like the question and answer site. It's like the new Yahoo Answers. Um, someone I'm on there, so people will tag me for certain. It's combat sports related martial arts stuff. And someone had asked like who I think is the GOAT pound for pound fighter, boxing, MMA, or kickboxing. Someone that has a title or someone that retires with a couple of losses. And it's one of those questions that always comes up over and over again when you hear about the greatest of all time, which is what GOAT's supposed to stand for. And I fucking hate that people call other people an animal now. Ever since I rather you say greatest of all time, but I was just that's a whole other thing. But like when that debate comes up, when the GOAT debates come up for you, as because I always tease you about being the Just Bleed guy. I'm just curious, like, do you enjoy those conversations, or do you feel like it's stupid every time they come up?
I used to enjoy them a lot more when it was like a smaller crowd and the
Mm-hmm.
sport hadn't been around as long. And um, you just it's no, I really don't anymore because I don't think you have historical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has that. So like if I'm sitting in a room and I'm talking with a bunch of people like you and guys who have been around this sport for 20 plus years,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I can have that conversation. To have a conversation with somebody who's only been around the sport for like 5 years, even 10 years, and didn't go back and do their research and watch the old Pride and watch the old IVC or the Baron, like
Mm-hmm.
didn't do the historical research, then no, I think it's a waste of time conversation. And I think that's what we get a lot of with these nowadays because the GOAT changes every weekend. And
Mm-hmm.
that's and like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like there was a time where it was like, okay, it's either GSP, it's either Anderson or it's Fedor. Like we're not like, and we're not gonna even contemplate anybody else in the
Mm-hmm.
mix because that would just be crazy talk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I mean, you literally have, I mean, you'll have people argue for Aldo. You'll still have people argue for BJ Penn. You've got people on go for McGregor. You've got people that'll say Adesanya. You've got people that'll say Volkanovski. I mean, it just goes on and on. And I don't think unless you have the perspective of all the years of this sport and really, really reached out and wanted to learn, about I mean, you could make an argument Igor Vovchanchyn should be somewhere on that list. Like
Mm-hmm.
his time and space in this sport, the dude went on like a 40, I think it was 37 fight win streak.
Mm-hmm.
In bare knuckles, he won 8 no holds barred tournaments that we know of. Like, like that's to think about that in today's time and space is absolutely lunacy. I mean, like, could you imagine watching Conor McGregor win 3 8-man tournaments in 1 month? Like bare knuckle, no rules. Like
Yeah.
that, I mean, it's a totally different sport. So like you can't it, 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 it you need to be able to acknowledge that like guys had their times and eras, and I think really that's more what the better argument would be is like, you got your pioneers, you got your golden era fighters, and then you've got the ESPN and the
Mm.
endeavor years. There's like the Brock era somewhere kind of in there, that maybe like the early 2010s. I don't even know what we would really call that era. Maybe like the farewell Zuffa years where we kind of bitched about stuff, but stuff
That's
was
like
really really good.
is that the Fox? I guess that's the Fox era, right? The Fox era.
The
If you look at
Fox I
yeah,
think kicked in like 2011.
yeah,
Ish, so that's probably about right. Maybe 2009. It's
yeah,
hard to pinpoint exactly, but um, yeah. So maybe the Fox era, and the Fox era we complained about, but boy was that good.
yeah. It was
We
fun.
had title fights on Fox TV. We had,
Yeah,
you know,
there was always some place to watch it. You didn't have to have any, extra sign-ins or anything.
no, I mean you'd bitch because the
If they
prelims
weren't
might
on,
be on Fox Sports
yeah,
1 or 2 or something,
yeah,
or they'd kick it to Fuel TV one day because there was a bunch of sports on. But
yeah.
I so as far as the GOAT conversation, like I for me it's become more, and I stated this a couple weeks back, like it's become more about a personal goat. Like my
Hmm.
personal goat is Fedor based off of going to live events. I've never enjoyed watching a fighter fight more than I enjoyed the 7 times, I think it is, that I got to watch Fedor fight.
Mm.
Like that's to me, that win and lose, even though watching him lose was devastating when it was all said and done, like I never had more fun at the fights and more like adrenaline and more fired up, like, and I've seen I didn't get to see Anderson Silva a million times fight in
Hmm.
person. I saw Anderson Silva fight twice in person. He lost both. I mean, the
Hmm.
odds of that are pretty impressive
Yeah.
in itself, but he fought
But
Cormier
that's the
and
thing.
Weidman.
Like we all know, like especially if you follow this podcast, everybody knows Matt's a hardcore. Fedor is always going to be his top, always going to top the top of most of your list. But my question was my perception when it comes to the conversation about greatest of all times. Because time, we're still in time. Time is still moving right now. So like, and I've been like that about my fire. Like I was a hardcore boss rooting guy. Everybody knows that.
Mhm.
Kazushi Sakuraba, Crow Cop, Fedor. Right now, I mean, everybody knows if Justin Gaethje's fighting, I'm 1,000%. I turn into you. I turn into a Just Bleed guy when Justin Gaethje fights. You know what I mean? Like I always change mine, so I can't like this because the Ant kind of asked us this when we had Ant Walker on a couple of episodes ago. It's like 3 months ago, I think it was, and he asked us like who we thought the pound for pound was, and we really couldn't answer it because it's relative to what's going on. It's just relative to what's going on and what you, like you said, where your reference points are, and then there's always recency bias, and depending on how you watch, everybody watches fights differently. So I don't
Well,
know.
it's just it's you get both sides because like somebody should, in theory, have to do something to lose their status as the greatest of all time. Like,
Mm.
okay, so I'm gonna get back to Fedor thing. So my thing with Fedor was like up until 2011 ish, 10, 11, he was essentially the greatest of all
Hmm.
time because he was essentially undefeated, and he had fought 30 times, and he had fought in the biggest heavyweight organization in the world in Pride,
Hmm.
and you had that. But it only took like 3 fights, or no, it took like 7 or 8 fights, and suddenly Cain Velasquez is the greatest fighter of all
Hmm.
time. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like there's got to be some. You can't just how does that work?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like there's asked so like that's when it started jumping the shark for me. It was like we started going, okay, well now Dos Santos is the greatest. Now people say Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time. Like it's like, well, what are we? I mean, how are we? It's all new fans. You get new opinions, and unless you watched everybody, I mean, you can't. I mean, I think the only real weight class. I mean, I think you almost have to break it down to weight classes, and at that point, it gets a little easier. Um, but even middleweight, like, is Adesanya greater than Anderson Silva? Like, is what I like, because
Yeah.
it's not just success in the cage,
Hmm.
although that's huge. Like, did Anderson Silva did more for MMA the UFC specifically than
Mm-hmm.
Adesanya has done by like leaps and bounds. I mean, he went from the golden era to the Fox era,
Mm-hmm.
all undefeated and flashy and knocking people out and all over
And had
Sports
had
Center and
yeah, and had Burger King and Nike sponsoring
on the
him. Yeah,
cover of video games. And
yeah.
I mean, he made those guys made the UFC known. I mean, it's like Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell's on nobody's GOAT list, but
He
if you're
should be.
talking the
Yeah.
GOAT of like, I
There's
mean,
a
like,
there's a 30 for 30 just on his rivalry with Tito Ortiz alone. Yeah.
and a lot, some people don't consider Ali's pretty much the universal GOAT for boxing,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't necessarily believe he was the greatest pound for pound boxer of all time. But it was
And
because of
that's something that
everything he did. It was
yeah.
everything he did. It was his activism.
Mm-hmm.
It was his how he stood.
And I
How
feel like that's even going to shift as like when we're old men, when we're older men, like when we're like like in the nursing home or whatever, and some young guy talks to us. If we mention Ali, they might raise an eyebrow at us and say, no, it was Mike Tyson. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's all relative to the time that you're in and and your reference points of watching the sport. But I mean, every time that so when I answered this question, I even said, like, MMA media likes to use this for clicks, like they'll bring up these opinionated blogs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the answer is it's you can't say it's anybody, because until the world stops spinning, if there's some way that we could all get our collective consciousness at the end of everything, and look back and say, okay, now it's done. Let's look back at everyone and say who's done what. I mean, the list, like, for me, Justin Gaethje, when he's said and done with he's going to be one of the greatest of all time for me too.
he'll be the greatest of all time as an entertainer, but he won't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily be the greatest of all time record wise. I mean, he could go on a huge run. Don't get me wrong, but you're always going to have the Khabibs and the stuff that are
Mm-hmm.
30-0. You're going to have the GSPs that are 28-2.
Yeah.
You're going to have those. So like, there's always going to be an argument. But I think that the GOAT talk also kind of takes away from, like, let's just appreciate the people like Gagey who come to the table and fight. Like, they're the entertainers. Gagey's the GOAT entertainer when it comes to fighting. Gagey's kind of like Tyson in a sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
we can look back on the old history of boxing because we grew up in a time where we were kind of like in the middle of that. We grew up in the
Mm-hmm.
80s, 90s when
Mm-hmm.
boxing was really, really good,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
but we also always heard stories about Frazier and Ali and Foreman and all those guys who were pretty much before us. But we really wouldn't be into boxing if it wasn't for Mike Tyson. If it wasn't for Mike Tyson's Punch Out video game, like, how many people our age wouldn't have been as interested in boxing? Because you got into Mike Tyson, you saw Tyson fight, then you see he's fighting Ray Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
You look into Ray Mercer's history, then you see Spinks and these guys who he's
Mm-hmm.
beating, but you still opens your eyes to, well, Spinks fought I don't know. I'm just gonna Foreman, or Spinks fought, Ali. So it kind of creates that web where you really learn the sport. But Tyson was the one who kind of, like, I imagine there's a lot of younger kids seeing Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and those guys going out there and bleeding all over the cage and putting on brawls,
Yeah.
and that's opening their eyes to the sport. So you might have guys that Justin Gaethje is their GOAT. He's who they know. He's their kids. It's their
Mm-hmm.
favorite fighter. My favorite baseball player was Wally Joyner. He was an average first baseman. Still have his
Mm-hmm.
autograph up on the wall. First autograph I
Mm-hmm.
ever had in my life. But
Oh
he's my
wow.
favorite baseball player of all time. But he wasn't a superstar. But he was when I was a kid, he was the man. He had Wally World, and he had the Vacation movie, and it was that's what got me into it. And I remained loyal to that guy. And it's like Chris Weidman. I still love Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman is one of my favorite fighters. Had a tough
Mhm,
fucking run, and I probably should
mhm.
never go watch the dude ever fight again in person, because I've brought that dude more bad luck to his fights than, between Jacare Romero and Uriah Hall. I
Mhm.
don't need to go see him fight in person anymore. I've personally probably taken 30 years off that man's life, just being in the crowd. But at the same time, like, I don't miss his fights.
That's
Like,
for
I like
folks
to
that don't
watch him.
know. Matt's talking about the he's got a weird. I don't know if it's like a weird tattoo, or maybe he's got 3 6s on his scalp. when he when he goes to MMA events. But Matt has a long history of the craziest stuff happening during. I mean, shit. You were in town when I was in Vegas. You and I were both in Vegas for UFC 200 when John Jones overnight literally got pulled from the card. So I mean, maybe
Dude,
that's a little.
it's,
That's
there's a level of curse that seems to follow me around,
what.
and even when you don't expect it. I mean, I've been to a couple pro wrestling events this year, and actually had like matches,
Wow.
like
Just
broken legs, and
just hit me. You
like
went to Jillian's fight, son of a bitch.
Jillian. That didn't go well. I went to a New Japan Pro Wrestling match the other day, and the main event ends. The girl breaks her ankle, and they have to go to like Plan B, and it's like, good lord, I'm coming here to watch like
That was
scripted shit.
was that
Y- You
that
know,
was recently, right? That
it
was
was Mercedes or
oh wow,
Sasha
yeah.
Banks, and I go to WrestleMania, and knees are flying out, and what's Shane McMahon's quads exploding, and I'm going, this is like like I just want to watch something, like it's like going to a movie and having like the actor die halfway through the movie, and they're like, yeah, we
Hmm.
can't record it, like you just get half a movie. It's like,
Yeah.
god dang, it's just scripted. Like, can I get through a scripted event with at least not having to see people get carried out on stretchers, and and
Yeah.
craziness happenings. Um, but yeah, I mean, getting back to the goat thing, I think it's a generational thing, and I think you really got to open your mind up to, I think people used to take hard stance at it when we were all hardcore fans. I know I've lightened on it a little bit, like
Hmm.
as far as like giving a little bit of leniency to people who want to put people in the list that I think are a little bit too new.
Hmm.
If you've only fought 12 times and you started fighting in 2016, probably not going to be on my goat list, but you might be on somebody who's 22 years old, so
Hmm.
um, but I think it's a fun conversation, and I think as long as it brings up the names of the guys from the past, I think it's good, because I think
Yeah, that's true.
as long as you keep bringing those guys' names up, and I don't, doing podcasts like this where we mention the
Hmm.
Vochanchians, we mention the Shoguns, we mention the Vanderleys. I mean, it's you think like so many people only got to see Shogun at the end of his like last 10 fights, like you don't understand like what was there. Like there was a time Shogun was arguably the light heavyweight goat. Like
Hmm.
he was like 26 years old, just wrecking fools that are in the Hall of Fame all over the place. So
Yeah.
it's just it's a weird thing. It's weird how times passed in this sport, but I think there's a lot of stars out there. I just don't think we have the promotion. I think it's strange to me we don't see Adesanya on commercials. It's strange to me we don't see, Justin Gagey on a, you know,
Well, he's done commercials though.
I mean, has he really done like,
Yeah, he
you
did it.
know,
He's done for I don't want. It's not Patron. Some tequila commercial that's pretty funny with
yeah,
him and
but the UFC sponsors and stuff. Like, I'm just surprised they're not more
yeah.
mainstream. Like, it took like 2 years, and all of a sudden we had Tank Abbott on Friends. Like, where's, you know what I mean?
I remember
Like
that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't watch much of the late night talk shows and stuff. But are these guys ever on it? I mean, has
No.
Alexander Volkanovski ever been on the Tonight Show, or if that even exists anymore? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Saturday
Yeah.
Night Live. When was the last UFC fighter on Saturday Night Live? Has there
Yeah.
ever? Did Chuck Liddell ever host it?
No, Ronda Rousey, I think, is the only
Ronda
one.
Rousey, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, but that's like, where's that? Like, if you have a promoter, it seems to me in management, like that's where you should be getting out there. How did Conor McGregor never do Saturday Night Live?
I mean, he's always somebody that's been. I mean, one thing about the going back to the Ultimate Fighter, and even his own little documentary show that he's got on Netflix, that's kind of something I always forget because of his antics and the stuff he's usually in the news for. Is he definitely has this weird, like, not weird, it's unique to the guys that choose the fighting life, but he definitely, because those things definitely come his way, and he turns them down because he doesn't want it to get in the way of, especially now, because he's at the point where he's taken a few losses. His greatness has come to question, at least in his own mind. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And when he sees that coming, if you didn't watch that, he does an interview before the Ultimate Fighter with Megan O'Leary, and you can see him. He kind of touches on that, which not for nothing. I mean, this that completely has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But Megan O'Leary, when it comes to folks interviewing fighters like that, and they don't make you fucking fall asleep, really good at her job. And I'm not just saying that because she's good looking. She's like, I watched that interview from beginning to end. I thought her questions were great. Because some people will bore the fuck out of you, and that you don't even want to watch the interview. Like Brett Okamoto, I can't stand any interview he does. I now I'm at the point that if I see his face on the other side of the screen, I'm just like, you know what? I'll read someone else's blog about it. Like I can't just sit through him. He just it's almost like he's on a bad date with anyone he interviews. But I'm good. That's besides the point. I'm ranting, but uh, about McGregor, I feel like to the question you asked, I've heard so many stories about him turning stuff down, and him doing the what's the movie he's going to be in, the Roadhouse remake,
Okay, so
like whatever.
okay.
Yeah,
You do have that, and they've been
yeah,
in some movies.
yeah. But he's been offered other stuff. Like I know they wanted him to do something for was it a video game or something, and then he said yes, and then was like no, like I want
Yeah,
to
and
fight, Nate Diaz again or whatever it
he's on
was.
his own brand. McGregor doesn't need to be put over. McGregor's already over.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just talking about some of the up and coming guys like Brandon Moreno. Like why isn't he like you know what I mean? Like
Like
I
why
don't
isn't
know.
he in the next Lego movie?
I, why don't they have a Brandon
Yeah,
Moreno Lego?
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like build your octagon. Here's Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara
yeah,
France. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
maybe it's not the demographic. I don't know if kids that have Legos are watching
Or
UFC. I don't know.
grown-ups that have Legos,
I don't know.
apparently.
Yeah, I got toys on the wall in here, so if they had Brandon Moreno Lego, I'd probably have it on my shelf. But
Yeah.
you know, who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that kind of wraps us up. I think we looking ahead towards if we're on next week. We got the pay-per-view out in Vancouver.
So,
Is
yeah,
that up on us?
yeah,
Okay,
The Canada one, yeah. So that's the pay-per-view next week. So we'll be doing our picks for that.
cool. All right. Well, until then, fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazel on Twitter, Carbeerzal on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And as always, you can check out our podcast at allaccessmma.com. Check out allaccessmma.com for MMA news, MMA stories, and our video podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a good night. Talk to you soon, Ed.
Peace.